He's got a gun." That shriek tore through the crisp Montana morning air like a jagged piece of metal, shattering the peace I'd spent 5 years building. And I just stood there on my porch, a mug of black coffee in one hand, and my grandfather's old Mossberg 500 resting easy on my shoulder, barrel pointed safely at the dirt, safety on, finger nowhere near the trigger. But to Patricia Vanderhoven, standing there in her pristine white heels that were already sinking into the mud of my driveway, it might as well have been a missile launcher. Her husband, Ken, was already fumbling for his phone, probably speed dialing their lawyer or the police, his face turning a shade of purple that matched his overpriced polo shirt, while their little entourage of HOA board members huddled behind them like frightened sheep. It was almost comical if it wasn't so infuriating, seeing these people who thought they owned the world just because they ran a homeowners association in the subdivision next door, a subdivision, mind you, that I didn't live in, didn't belong to, and wanted absolutely nothing to do with. See, my name is Jack Miller, and the 40 acres of timber and foothills I was standing on had been in the Miller family since 1955, bought by my grandfather after the war, paid for with sweat and scraped-together savings, long before the developers came in and chopped up the valley floor into quarter-acre lots called Pine Creek Estates. I moved back here after my wife, Elena, passed away, looking for silence, looking for the kind of solitude that heals you from the inside out, the kind where the only noise you hear is the wind in the ponderosa pines and the occasional elk bugling in the fall. I wasn't looking for a fight. I wasn't looking for trouble. I just wanted to be left alone to tend my garden and fix up the old barn. But trouble has a way of finding you, especially when trouble drives a Range Rover and calls herself the HOA president. It started innocently enough, about 3 months before the gun incident, with a letter in my mailbox, thick, creamy paper, expensive stock, looking like a wedding invitation but smelling like a lawsuit. It was an invitation from the Pine Creek HOA, politely suggesting that my property, specifically the 10 acres bordering their precious subdivision, was an eyesore due to unregulated vegetation and an antiquated structure, meaning my barn, and that they would be gracious enough to discuss me ceding that land to them for a community nature preserve and yoga pavilion in exchange for a tax write-off. I laughed, crumpled it up, and used it to start the fire in my wood stove that night, thinking that was the end of it, just some city folks confused about where their property line ended and the real world began. I was wrong, dead wrong, because people like Patricia don't take silence for an answer, they take it as a challenge. 2 weeks later, I came home from a supply run into town to find a drone hovering over my back pasture, buzzing like an angry hornet, peering down at my chickens, my woodpile, my life. I waved at it, not with all my fingers, and went inside, but the next day another letter arrived, this one certified. They weren't asking anymore, they were demanding. They claimed my unkept land was affecting property values, harboring vermin, my chickens, and that they had voted to incorporate my disputed acreage into their master plan for the safety of the community. Disputed? There was no dispute. I had the deed. The survey markers were concrete pillars thick enough to stop a tank, and the county records were clear as day, but I was learning fast that to a bully with a budget, facts are just obstacles to be bulldozed. I decided to play nice one time. I drove down to their little clubhouse for their monthly meeting, walked in wearing my work boots and flannel, feeling the eyes of 50 suburbanites boring into me. I stood up when it was my turn and told them, calm as I could, that I wasn't selling, I wasn't donating, and I wasn't joining their club. I told them my land was private property, grandfathered in as agricultural, and that their rules stopped at the fence line. Patricia just smiled at me. That tight, condescending smile you give a child who doesn't understand how the world works, and said, "Mr. Miller, we're trying to build a community here, a sanctuary, and we can't have a rundown farm dragging down the aesthetic of our luxury investments. We're willing to be reasonable, but we will protect our interests." Reasonable. That word kept coming up. The escalation happened fast after that meeting. First, it was the citations. I started finding bright orange stickers on my fence posts citing violations of HOA bylaws, grass too long, improper fencing material, unauthorized livestock. They were fining me $500 a day for breaking rules I never agreed to, on land they didn't govern. It was harassment, plain and simple, A paper terrorism campaign designed to bury me in so much bureaucratic nonsense that I'd just give up and sign the deed over to make it stop. I called my old buddy, Tom Reynolds, who happens to be the county sheriff. We played high school football together back when we both had better knees. And he came out, looked at the stickers, shook his head, and spat in the dirt. "Jack," he said, looking tired. "This is civil mostly. I can tell him to knock it off, but unless they physically damage something or threaten you, my hands are tied until a judge gets involved. And these folks? They've got lawyers on retainer who play golf with the judges." That was the moment I realized the law wasn't a shield. It was a game, and I was losing because I didn't know the rules. Then came the morning I woke up to the sound of a chainsaw. I ran out in my boxers and boots, hard hammering, to find 3 guys in neon vests cutting down my fence, my grandfather's fence, and a surveyor driving new stakes 50 feet onto my property. I screamed at them to stop, and one of them, a smug kid chewing gum, just pointed to a clipboard and said, "Work order from the HOA. Preparing the site for the community pavilion. Take it up with the board, buddy." I kicked them off my land, physically grabbed the surveyor's tripod and tossed it back over the line, and told them if they came back, they'd be trespassing. That afternoon, I went into town and hired Sarah Jenkins. Now, Sarah isn't your typical high-rise lawyer. She operates out of a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. Her office smells like old coffee and ambition, and she hates HOAs more than she hates losing. When I showed her the letters, the fines, and the video I took of them cutting my fence, her eyes lit up like a predator seeing a limping gazelle. "Jack," she said, leaning over her cluttered desk, "this isn't just harassment. This is slander of title. It's tortious interference. And if they're trying to seize land based on false claims, it's encroaching on fraud. But here's the thing. They're banking on you running out of money before you get to court. That's their strategy. They don't have to be right. They just have to be richer." She told me to document everything. Every letter, every interaction, every footprint. "Don't engage," she warned me. "Let them hang themselves." But it's hard not to engage when you come home to find a cement mixer truck backing down your private driveway. That was the breaking point. 3 days ago, I was coming back from the hardware store, and there it was, a massive truck churning gray sludge, guided by Ken, Patricia's husband, right onto the patch of meadow where Elena used to sit and read. They were pouring a slab, a foundation, right there on my land. I blocked their exit with my pickup truck, got out, and for the first time, I lost my cool. I yelled. I cursed. I told Ken that if that concrete touched the ground, there would be hell to pay. Ken just laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Possession is 9/10 of the law, Jack. Once the structure is up, good luck getting a judge to order us to tear down a community asset. We're doing you a favor, really. This land is wasted on you." I didn't hit him. God knows I wanted to. I wanted to wipe that smirk off his face so bad my hands were shaking, but I remembered Sarah's advice. I pulled out my phone, recorded the license plates, recorded Ken admitting they knew it was my land, but didn't care, and then I moved my truck. As they drove past, Patricia was in the passenger seat of the lead car, and she blew me a kiss. A mocking, little flyaway kiss. That night, I sat on the porch with Ranger, my old blue heeler, and looked at the wet concrete scar on my meadow. I felt small. I felt like the world had changed into something unrecognizable, something cruel and transactional where dignity didn't matter, only leverage. I thought about selling. I really did. I thought, maybe I take the money, move further out, somewhere they can't find me. But then I looked at the old oak tree where I'd carved my initials next to Elena's, and I heard my grandfather's voice in my head, clear as a bell. "They only take what you give them, Jack. Don't give them an inch." So I prepared. I put up "No trespassing" signs every 20 feet. I installed trail cameras in the trees. And I took the Mossberg out of the safe, cleaned it, oiled it, and checked the action. I wasn't going to shoot anyone. I'm not a violent man. But in Montana, carrying a weapon on your own land is as legal as breathing. And sometimes you have to speak a language bullies understand. Which brings us back to this morning. Patricia and her crew had returned, bringing a contractor to inspect their illegal foundation, acting like they owned the place. When I walked out with the shotgun, the dynamic shifted instantly. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of people who have never faced consequences. "I am asking you once," I said, my voice steady, loud enough to be picked up by the GoPro I had strapped to my chest. Get off my property. You are trespassing. You have damaged my land. The sheriff is on his way. You're threatening us. Patricia screeched, clutching her pearls. You're brandishing a weapon. That's a felony. It's not brandished, I said calmly. It's carried. Open carry is legal. Standing on my own porch is legal. What you're doing, criminal trespass and destruction of property, is not. Now move. Ken puffed up his chest, trying to look tough for his wife. You think we're scared of a hillbilly with a gun? We'll own this place by Christmas. We have a petition signed by 200 residents declaring this land a public hazard. You're done, Miller. That's when the gravel crunched behind them. Sheriff Tom Reynolds rolled up in his cruiser, lights off, but presence loud. He stepped out, adjusting his belt, looking like a disappointed father. Morning, Jack, Tom said, ignoring the HOA crowd entirely. Coffee hot. Morning, Tom. It's fresh, I replied. Patricia ran over to him, practically tripping over her heels. Sheriff, thank God. Arrest this maniac. He pulled a gun on us. We were just conducting a site inspection for the community project. Tom looked at me, looked at the shotgun resting on my shoulder, then looked back at Patricia. Ma'am, in this state, Mr. Miller has every right to be armed on his property. What I want to know is why you're standing past the no trespassing sign I saw at the gate. Do you have a court order allowing you access? We have a board resolution, she stammered. A board resolution ain't a warrant, and it ain't a deed, Tom said, his voice dropping an octave. You folks are trespassing. I've got a report here of property damage regarding a fence and unauthorized dumping of concrete. Now, I can start writing tickets and hauling folks to the station, or you can get in your fancy cars and get the hell off this man's land. And if you come back without a judge's signature, I won't be asking nicely. They scrambled. It was beautiful. The white Range Rover spun tires in the mud as they peeled out, retreating back to their manicured lawns. Tom tipped his hat to me. Don't think this is over, Jack. They're embarrassed now. That makes him dangerous. He was right. 2 days later, I was served with a restraining order and a lawsuit. They were suing me for emotional distress and endangerment, claiming I was an unstable vigilant running a paramilitary compound. They plastered my face on the neighborhood Facebook group, calling me the madman of Miller's Hill. I went into town to buy groceries, and people stared. A cashier I'd known for 10 years wouldn't look me in the eye. They were winning the court of public opinion, painting me as the villain in their suburban fairy tale. But Sarah Jenkins had been busy. Jack, she called me a week before the hearing. I found something. Or rather, someone found me. It turned out, not everyone in Pine Creek Estates loved Patricia. The treasurer of the HOA, a nervous little guy named Mr. Henderson who had been bullied into silence for years, had grown a conscience. He sent Sarah a packet of emails, internal communications between Patricia, Ken, and a developer named distinct from the neighborhood builders. We walked into the courtroom like we were walking into a funeral. Patricia was there, dabbing fake tears with a tissue, her lawyer giving a grand speech about safety and community values. The judge, Judge Holloway, a stern woman who didn't suffer fools, looked at me over her glasses like I was a bug she wanted to squash. Mr. Miller, she said, the allegations here are serious. Threatening neighbors with a shotgun? Impeding community improvements. Your Honor, Sarah stood up, smoothing her cheap suit. Before you rule, we'd like to submit into evidence Exhibit A. These are emails dated 6 months ago between Mrs. van der Hoven and Apex Development Corporation. Patricia froze. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she was going to faint. Sarah continued, reading aloud. Subject, the Miller acquisition. Email from Patricia. Don't worry about Miller. We'll harass him with fines and violations until he cracks. Once we secure the land under the guise of a community park, we can quietly rezone it and sell it to you for the luxury condo expansion. Our fee for facilitating this transfer will be 10% of the sale price, $200,000. The silence in that courtroom was heavy, suffocating. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. This was never about a park, Your Honor, Sarah said, her voice ringing clear. This was a conspiracy to defraud a landowner and the homeowners association itself for personal gain. They were using HOA funds to pave the way for a private sale that would line their own pockets. Judge Holloway looked at Patricia. The look was withering. Mrs. van der Hoven, is this true? Patricia tried to speak, but only a squeak came out. Her lawyer started packing his briefcase. clearly realizing he hadn't been paid enough for this train wreck. The gavel came down like a thunderclap. The judge didn't just dismiss the case against me. She dissolved the current HOA board on the spot, pending a fraud investigation. She granted me a permanent injunction against Patricia and Ken, barring them from coming within 500 yards of my property line. And best of all, she ordered them to pay for the removal of the concrete and the repair of my fence, out of their own pockets, not the HOA's funds. Walking out of that courthouse, the sun felt warmer. The air tasted sweeter. I saw Ken and Patricia arguing in the parking lot, pointing fingers at each other, their petty little kingdom crumbling around them. It took 3 months to get everything back to normal. Mr. Henderson, the whistleblower, took over the HOA, and the first thing he did was send me a letter, not a fine, but an apology and a basket of muffins. The concrete was jackhammered up. The fence was rebuilt stronger than before. I still stand on my porch every morning with my coffee. The Mossberg stays in the safe now mostly, but I look out at the tree line, at the spot where the surveyor stakes used to be, and I think about how fragile peace really is. We think our homes are our castles, that a deed creates a force field. But the truth is, you only really own what you can defend. Not just with fences or guns, but with truth, with grit, and with the willingness to stand there when the whole world is screaming at you to move, and simply say, no. It makes me wonder, though, how many people out there didn't have a Sarah Jenkins? How many folks folded when the first letter came, scared of the fines, scared of the lawyers, and lost pieces of their history to someone else's greed? It's a terrifying thought that your life's work can be dismantled by a committee with a letterhead. So, I've got to ask you folks listening, where do you draw the line? If a community decides they need your backyard for the greater good, do they have a right to it? Or is private property the one thing that should be sacred, no matter what? I read the comments, and I really want to know, would you have held the line like I did, or would you have taken the check and walked away? Let me know down below. And hey, stay safe, keep your fences mended, and watch your six.